Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be back up on stage here again. Today I'm going to talk to you about securing your site and web security basics. So first of all, I'm Katie_Fenn on Twitter. That's going to be on screen throughout the talk. Please let me know what you think about my talk. And also there should be a link to my slides on my Twitter feed as well, just in case you want to follow along. And just in case large animations or videos on big screens make you feel sick or uncomfortable, a content warning will appear in the bottom right-hand side of my slides. So hi, I'm Katie. I work for NPM. Come find me later on if you want any NPM stickers. We have lots and lots and lots of them. This is the third time I've been on this stage, and it's a total privilege to be back up here again. This is me in 2016 in the family photo. So, like a lot of people on the internet, I came to the web and web development through fandom. Fans meet other fans online using web forums, just like this one. And my fandom was the Final Fantasy games. Back in the day, a common site on forums used to be post signatures, just like these. And you could add them to the end of your post to share your fandom and show it off. It's a way of creatively expressing yourself as well. And for many, it was an introduction to web design and web development. You can add them to your posts using HTML. This was my first introduction to web development, to HTML, and also my first introduction to messing with other people's sites was HTML bombs. So this was accidental at first, but when adding signatures, but then also people found out how to use it maliciously. And they did this by inserting mismatched HTML tags into the signature. And they did this to make content disappear or explode off the side of the screen and otherwise make the content completely unusable on the forum, unreadable. This is caused by writing code that trusts anything that the user sends you, which is otherwise known as banned input validation. So once there was a forum that was dedicated to a different game, the game called Animal Crossing. And if you've not played Animal Crossing is an idyllic town that is filled with inhabitants who peacefully coexist and cooperate with each other. This forum had a page that let you, this page had a page that allowed you to edit your profile. So you could change your username, you could change your password, and you can change your email address. One day, one user noticed that this form had a hidden user ID in this form. This hidden user ID instructed the backend which user was being edited. So they thought, what happens if I change that user ID? And they found that they could edit the profile of any user on this forum, including the forum admin, which just had the user ID of 1. Needless to say, the forum for this pleasant game descended into utter anarchy for days until it was fixed. There aren't any rules for writing software on the web, but if there was one, I would make it never trust user input. Never ever trust user input. Always ask yourself how even the nicest, kindest people will misuse your code for fun and profit, because they will. So how can you help protect yourself against input validation? Well, you can use a library like Joy to validate data on your back end to make sure that the data that you receive is what it seems and it's within sensible bounds. You can also validate a user's actions against their identity by creating an access control list that defines what actions a user can take and on whose data they can take them on. Never rely on client-side validation alone as well. Client-side validation is a convenience to the user and nothing more. Any data that's sent to your server from outside its own network is suspect, and anyone can use it against you. So many forums on the early web allowed you to log in, and this saved you from proving your credentials every time you wanted to post a new post. And many of these forums were vulnerable to an attack using this one neat password that would allow you to log in as any user that you wanted. This attack allows users to run their own database queries against your website, which is otherwise known as SQL Injection. So when you fill out a username and a password in a login form, those credentials are submitted into forms, and those credentials are then filled into SQL queries that you can see on the right. SQL is a popular language for querying databases, and this example checks users matching a username and a password. If the database finds matching users, then it grants permission to log in. Let's see what happens to that query if we submit that one weird password. The database has interpreted that password as regular SQL, and it's run it against the database. This has a consequence that we didn't expect. This part of the query says, give me all the users that have the username admin. And this part of the query says, and the password all 1 equals 1, which is a bit like saying or true because 1 equals 1. This makes this query match every single user in the database. But as long as the software is checking for more than 0 matches, that's enough for it to grant access to log in. This is essentially saying to the database, give me all the users that have the username admin, or whatever you got, I guess, I'm not fussy. SQL Injection hands the keys to the database to your users, and it allows attackers to access your website, to recover sensitive information, and to give themselves complete control of your site and install any code that they want. One famous example of SQL injection was Drupalgeddon, and Drupalgeddon affected every single Drupal 7 website underneath the version 7.3.2. It allowed full remote code execution, which allows the attacker full control over your website. And there's some evidence to suggest that the attackers patched the original exploit after breaching sites to prevent the breach from being discovered. So if you used one of the handy tools that the Drupal community developed to tell you whether your site was vulnerable, it would say, no, it's fine. You don't need to worry about it. No, really, it's fine. So how can you help protect yourself against SQL injection? Don't use string concatenation to build up SQL queries like you saw me do with the login form. Instead, use parameterized query tools such as PDO or Connects. Or you can use an object relational mapping tool. These tools are created by experts, and they know the kinds of exploits that are possible with SQL. Get help from the experts, because this is a really, really, really hard problem. So a small bonus story that isn't related to the web and web security, but I wanted to tell, just goes to show just how easy it is to cause a lot of damage without actually breaching a software system at all. Now, when I was younger, I used to play a game called World of Warcraft. And in World of Warcraft, you could take on huge monsters and take them down with 30 or 40 other people. Well, one day, someone found out that you could tug one of these monsters across the overworld, across the game world, and into a capital city. This is Lord Kazakh. Lord Kazakh was tugged across the world into the capital city, Stormwind. Now, when Lord Kazakh kills a player in-game, he regenerates his HP, his health, and then his maximum HP increases. So with lots and lots of low-level players, after about half an hour, he became pretty much immortal, and the makers, Blizzard, had to roll back the server in order to restore people's players because he was just wandering around having a great time. The best bit is when they all go and totally surprises him. There. So another story about my time on Final Fantasy forums came when I was browsing the site. I was just reading discussions on whether it is possible to resurrect a certain character for fans who know which game I'm talking about. And I just found that I was logged out. I was just reading, and then I was met with the login screen. I thought, what's going on here? And it wasn't just me, it was affecting a lot of other users as well. So I thought, what's going on? Well, we eventually tracked it down to one user with a broken avatar. I thought, what's going on here? Well, it turns out this user had set their avatar to logout.php, which meant that anyone who was browsing this site and saw this user's post, they would send a request to logout.php and they'd just be logged out, and the forum would not question it at all. This attack gets other users to do your dirty work for you, which is also known as Crosssite request forgery, or CSRF for short. Crosssite request forgery was successfully exploited on the Netflix website a long time ago. And this is not the Netflix that we know today. This is the Netflix that used to post you DVDs. You couldn't stream that much video back in the day, so they'd post you DVDs through the post so you could watch at home. This attack was possible without injecting content into Netflix at all. In fact, there was no breach of the website. In fact, you could host this attack on your own website and then just convince people to visit that website. And we know that's easy to do because how many times have we seen this happen where you click on a link and it's not what you expect it to be? So what if you could convince people to visit your website? And what if those people were logged into Netflix? Well, you could do this. You could just pop an image down the bottom, just like we saw on the Final Fantasy forum. And then we could fit in a URL that goes to the Netflix website just like this. Now this URL adds a certain film to your queue. And if you sprinkle in a couple of other requests to change the account name on that account and to change the name and the shipping address, then you could ship yourself free DVDs courtesy of whoever looked at your website. And this was discovered in 2006 by someone called Dave Ferguson. And he was shipping himself all the films that he wanted to watch completely for free. So cross-site request forgery exploits the trust that website puts in users' browsers. Why shouldn't Netflix trust these requests? They come from legitimate users. The users have the right cookies and they themselves logged in using real accounts. The problem stems from trusting users' sessions and cookies on their own. So how can you help protect yourself against cross-site request forgery? You can verify the origin and referrer headers on HTTP requests to confirm that they come from your site. These headers can't be set programmatically by JavaScript in browsers. These headers can be used in other sorts of attacks though, so it's only good to check these for cross-site request forgery. You can also use synchronizer tokens or CSRF tokens to verify that requests have come from a real form on your site. These tokens are long, unpredictable data that has been generated for that user on your server. Then these are placed into web forms for submission along with your form data. Your server then only trusts requests that have a recently generated CSRF token for that user. If it doesn't have a token, then it can reject it. Cookie to header tokens are also similar. This relies on JavaScript's same origin protocol, which means that JavaScript can only set HTTP headers for sites of the same origin that it's hosted on. This makes it harder to perform CSRF attacks. And lastly, all this is absolutely no defense if your site has been compromised in any other way using another attack. For example, cross-site scripting, which we're going to get onto next. How disappointed would you be if I changed the slide now? Let's talk about BB code. BB code was a special language that allowed you to format your text on forums, and it was intended as a replacement for HTML, as a subset for HTML. The idea is that HTML is a very big, complicated language, so creating a subset language that was just used for formatting text would make it easier to validate BB code than it is HTML. You could use it to insert your favorite GIFs to your heart's content, because this is the kind of thing that we considered fun in the early 2000s. So one day, one of my friends found out by mismatching the BB code tags in their posts, such as opening and closing BB code tags and swapping them over. It's led to some weird stuff happening on the website. Mismatching tags confused the BB code transcoder and caused broken HTML to be inserted into the page. From there, they were able to insert arbitrary code into their posts, such as a JavaScript onload property, and then they could execute arbitrary JavaScript on that page to do whatever they wanted. They used this repeatedly to spam the forum of a rival online game clan during a match, and with their opponents distracted with their forums slowly filling up with garbage, they actually won the match. This attack allows someone else to run their code on your website, which is otherwise known as cross-site scripting. This is Samy Kamkar. In 2005, he became famous for having lots of friends, lots and lots and lots of friends. He wrote a worm, which is a self-replicating script, JavaScript that runs and then installs itself on pages and then spreads to other pages. So like lots of other people in 2005, Samy had a MySpace page. MySpace was a social network, but it was very limited by today's standards compared to something like Facebook and Twitter. You could customize your headline and put whatever text that you wanted in there. But it was very restrictive. It had limited formatting options. You could make text bold or italic, but that was pretty much it. You also had a photo gallery that allowed you to put 12 photos up. If you wanted to put more photos up, you had to take photos down. You couldn't just put more and more and more up. If you wanted to have new photos, you had to take them down first. So Samy discovered that some tags were filtered out from that headline. So div and image tags were allowed, but script tags were not allowed. MySpace wasn't about to let you run random JavaScript on their website. They were prepared. MySpace stripped that script tag, but some browsers executed JavaScript inside style tags. In this case, you wanted to set the background URL of a div, and the browser said, okay, what's the URL? And you said, JavaScript, and the browser said, okay. So MySpace stripped the word JavaScript, so that should thwart this kind of attack. But Samy found out that if you put a line break inside Java and script, it wouldn't say JavaScript anymore, and the browser would just run this just fine. So that's how Samy got JavaScript into a MySpace page in the first place. Now he tried to write a script that would self-replicate across everyone's MySpace pages. So you could find new friends by inspecting the page's source code. And to do this, normally you would use the body.innerHTML JavaScript function. MySpace had filtered this too. They were clearly prepared for Samy coming. This is not a problem if you concatenate a string and then evaluate it using eval. There's a very good reason why developers call eval evil, and it's because you can obfuscate code like this. This trick also works on XML HTTP request on ready state change, which is otherwise known as AJAX. And this allowed Samy to make HTTP requests to the MySpace API to send a request to add new friends. So Samy also found out that MySpace's API was hosted on a different subdomain to the regular website. The same origin protocol prevented him from sending requests to that domain. But he discovered that you could also view profile pages on the API's domain as well. So he just wrote some JavaScript to redirect the browser to that domain, and then the script was able to carry on. This is the complete code that he added to his page. And there's a few more tricks that Samy used, but these are the most interesting ones. So he added this to his profile headline, and then he waited. 1 hour later, he had 1 new friend request. Great, it's working. 7 hours later, he had 221 new friend requests, and it's starting to take off. 1 hour later, that number has more than doubled to 480. It's growing exponentially because every new friend that Samy recruits also recruits all of their friends as well. And that number is growing faster and faster and faster. 8 hours later, Samy has 900,000 new friend requests. And now it's growing so fast that every refresh visibly adds thousands and thousands more people. This is Samy's actual screenshot, and you can see that really, really high number as well, and it's just growing all the time. 1 hour later, MySpace collapses under the load of people wanting to become Samy's friend. MySpace eventually recovered and patched the vulnerability just 2 hours later. Samy was raided by the US Secret Service. He was sentenced to 90 days community service. He was only allowed the use of 1 computer and he could not connect to the internet. And he was ordered to pay over $15,000 restitution to MySpace. Crosssite scripting allows users to inject their own code into your website. And some believe that content injection is a better name for cross-site scripting because injecting images, injecting CSS is just as dangerous as injecting JavaScript as well. So how can you help protect yourself against cross-site scripting? Sanitize user input using a library such as libsanitize, using a lib such as sanitize HTML, which is an NPM package. Don't be tempted to roll your own. MySpace were clearly prepared for this, and they were still not prepared enough. This is a really, really challenging technical problem, and it is really hard to do. Get help from the experts. Use an auto-escaping templating library such as React or Angular. They won't save you on their own because it's possible for a skilled programmer to look down through the source code of React and access the underlying API calls that make that happen and work around them. But they are very convenient to use and help avoid making silly mistakes. You can also implement a content security policy. This restricts which domains content can be securely loaded from. Loading content from third parties such as CDNs is a very, very high risk. So you want to lock that down to only domains that you trust. You can also add a sub-resource integrity link to your script and link tags. This allows you to insert a hash into your page that matches the resource that you're loading. Now, when that resource is changed, that hash is like a fingerprint and it also changes. So if the browser detects that the fingerprint doesn't match the resource, then it can refuse to load it, which is one potential way of preventing a man-in-the-middle attack that is looking to insert their own code into your website. So in 1999, the web was like a Wild West frontier. Newly discovered attacks were used on pretty much all websites. And when something new was developed, almost all websites were vulnerable to it. And this is still the picture that we conjure when it comes to web security. And the truth is that stakes are higher now. This is not just people's posts about fandom and on forums on the internet. Now it's people's personal data. It's their money. It's their lives. It's such an important topic. But I'm convinced that there's never been a better time to learn. There's more resources and more tools to help you write secure code. And try not to think about the web and web security as a Wild West, but more of an adventure playground. If you're curious, security need not be hard to learn. It's a really important topic. I'm convinced that there's never been a better time to learn. Everyone has to start somewhere, and the early web was just where I started learning these contacts. So I just wanted to shout out to these people. These people shared stories in order to make this talk happen. Names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty. And also, if you want a Wombat sticker, you can come up and ask any people from NPM. You can ask myself, you can ask Jeff Lembach, who's at the front, and CJ Silverio, who's in the audience somewhere. Come up, we have lots of stickers. Please put them on your laptops and take photos of them and tell us whether you like them or not. Thank you very much.